Hi friends, this is Yoga Light. This is part 2 of a very broad overview of the use of the physical practices of yoga, which we can group as the 4 aims: longevity, athleticism, subtle development, and surrender. In this video, we look at athleticism. For some, deeper yoga means doing harder things and having more physical intensity. The motivation is challenging oneself and getting a workout. It often has specific measurable goals. There have been efforts to make yoga an Olympic sport. Essential is being able to do something difficult and grow, push limits, expect and focus on progress. This means you have to be motivated. Athletics often addresses psychology through confidence and motivation. It also has clear performance measurements, so it is interested in techniques and efficiency. Having a sense of athleticism is invaluable. The problems are recapture, narrow goals, mixing, the vital cycle, and competitive emotions. They overlap. In yoga, you should have a notion of the gunas, the 3 modes of nature. Briefly, in yogic philosophy, everything has a quality of being either in a mode of inertia, action, or harmony. We want to move towards harmony, but all 3 are useful. If you are too active, you need to slow down and rest. If we are too inactive, we need to start doing something. Balancing action and rest produces harmony. Harmony can be recognized because it expands awareness. I'm going to repeat that. Harmony can be recognized because it expands awareness. A key point is that it is not about a list of activities or foods classified according to their quality. It is about observing and recognizing the qualities within yourself and your environment. If you are awake enough to notice, recognize, and value the greater awareness when you are in balance, that is the key that unlocks deeper insight. With inertia, a common problem is as people get older, they lose motivation. Many achieved a peak physical state when they were younger and had a support system, such as participating in sports at school, being on a team, having organized competitions and practices, and having access to coaching and a chauffeur. As they get older with a job and family, they don't have the time or support to keep them at their peak. Later in life, they see the past and feel that they can't return to it, so their motivation is weak. They feel they can't recapture their youth. In the first part of the series on longevity, we pointed out mechanicalness. If your practice is mechanical, you are not learning. This is inertia. You need some push to go further and develop, so pushing yourself is essential, but it can also be out of balance and too much. Some people only identify with rajas, the action. Others divide yoga into hard and soft styles, but this reflects an unbalanced practice. A balanced practice would see what you need to bring about balance and have sequencing and techniques. You never really know why something appeals to someone or what role it plays in their growth. At the same time, you must have insight into the quality of things. Some physical activities have this idea of pain and gain, or that you must work to failure and endure soreness the next day, and everything should feel like a struggle. This can produce results as you get stronger and more accomplished physically. It can also give the satisfaction of having triumphed over adversity, but it tends to narrow the consciousness rather than expand it. Inertia dulls the consciousness, activity narrows it, and harmony expands it with receptivity. Athleticism is often predicated on being better and outdoing yourself and others. The ego gets invested in the results. A counter-dialogue tries to downplay or correct for the ego, sportsmanship, ideals, or a moral principle of humility. Even this humility can be more out of a fear of a fall if you get cocky. But this kind of drive for accomplishment is based on the fundamental idea of comparison. You're in competition. So this is part of the narrowing problem. An overly athletic focus can take up all the awareness to simply do the practice as one drives the body towards the goal. The second result is the dramatic need, where everything has to make a certain demand in order for it to feel right. For example, my friend went on a long meditation retreat that was pretty demanding, sitting for most hours a day pursuing meditation. Over the week they were there, they got very quiet and experienced silence, the space between the thoughts. But the issue was when they returned home, whenever they meditated, it demanded this great effort that they needed. They felt like they had to come home from work and sit for 3 hours or more a night, and it wasn't sustainable. They felt they needed to make the same effort to recapture the feeling. They were trapped in a technique. They needed the idea of how to flow off the mat or find meditation not dependent on a posture. Even when presented with alternatives, their habit and expectation was of a great dramatic effort. This can happen with physical practices, as they search to recapture intensity, not inner receptivity or higher awareness. A proper effort is filled with enthusiasm but not demand. They are trying to recapture the feeling of intensity by doing the workout. We do want to return to inner states or learn to maintain them, such as peace and equanimity, or to be able to summon sincerity, courage, and enthusiasm as the conditions require. These states are effective in interacting with others and are expanding. Narrow goals are another problem with athleticism. I've had people coming into class who wanted to do handstands, one specific pose. In the style that I teach, we think of sequences, not poses, and you build strength, alignments, breath, and movement systematically before you reach inverted balances. We want to work on the whole mind-body system and create awareness, not just achieve a pose. Lack of a balanced practice can lead to injury. Wanting to train to attain something is fundamental. A problem can also arise with good athletes who can quickly and easily do things from prior training. They get achievements but don't undergo the process. They can do the physical side but fail to perceive or develop the subtle aspects because the physical is easy for them, and they move on to other things. The speed at which we develop physically and subtly are different. The subtle is intertwined with the various layers of the being as they interact. If the focus is too much on the physical, they have motivation and confidence, but a limited view of themselves. We will cover this later with conditioning. Not everybody can use the physical for spiritual development as the main focus. One problem in yoga is the need for an explanation as to why we do something. For instance, in the system that I work with, we do movements where we are inhaling in places where, in a fitness context, you would be exhaling. And so when I am asked why the difference, well, it's because the way the energy moves through the spine. Some people won't understand what that is. Without key ideas and awareness, they will not have been able to see changes that come over time in how they perceive reality by moving energy. It's a subtle thing that doesn't connect to their fitness ideas. The key ideas have to be trained as well, which they may or may not be awake enough to hear and value. Energetic narrowness happens when people are unaware that their physical activity is related to other aspects of their lives, including emotions, energy levels, and thoughts. Some approaches to training can limit one's subtle energy development. Mental narrowing is ideas or lack of them which restrict yoga. Energetic narrowing is how the mind-body system is being conditioned around the ego aims. Narrowing only allows for one focus. It is not the same as concentration and becoming one-pointed. It is a single focus that lacks a capacity for receptivity. It only focuses on the ego's aims and can't observe or take in other things. Self-centeredness is an inability to see things other than from one's own experience. Judgments are made about people and situations based only on one's experience and according to what the person thinks they themselves would do. The ability to see or even consider other points of view and possibilities is limited. Sometimes there can be an ego appeal, something in it for them which will allow them to see in a different way, but this narrowing limits the emotional range. Some feelings are based in wideness. For instance, compassion is an inner state and feeling that has its own action and effect on others. It is not just mental compassion where you see someone in trouble and know you are supposed to help. Strong athleticism can feel good and generate things like confidence, which are invaluable. It can be supported by community and teamwork. If you only focus on having a certain intensity and the only value is the accomplishment of physical goals, this can lead to energetic narrowing. Everybody enters the flow at their own place, so they may come in with a more open consciousness that begins to be constricted. Someone who's energetically narrow should be opened up by a balanced practice. People focused on athleticism will also be more likely to want to mix things. It is one thing to do yoga and have another thing that you do. For instance, some friends were into competitive skateboarding and one did bicycle racing. It is another thought to mix up fitness activities with yoga. The yoga for golf versus golf for yoga problem is on one side. Some hybrids produce good fitness but lack the other aspects because they lack subtle knowledge. Good fitness is a good thing. Subtle yoga develops the energy body. Other forms of exercise will not open or develop it similarly and may limit it. For instance, some styles of Tai Chi are centered in the navel region, but most yoga seeks either the heart or the third eye. These change how we perceive the world and the types of insight we gain into the nature of self and reality. Performance measures are invaluable, but you are limited to what can be measured easily and the reason why a certain measure is valued. It depends on the weight given to them and the overall approach. This can distort practices such as performance breathing. Performance breathing focuses on the efficiency of the breath and measurements that allow you to improve your breathing technique. This aids in better performance, faster recoveries after workouts, and various health benefits. It has the advantage of generally being science-based. This is different from holotropic breathwork, which is primarily focused on being a therapy. You are not aiming to evolve, but rather you seek to find trauma. Performance breathing can be quite effective, but we still lose sight of the subtle or cloud it so that the higher aims using subtle energy and surrender are lost or are not even considered. When one studies these approaches, it crowds out the ability to take a more inner approach. Athleticism usually has aims or goals. Having an aim is better than lacking an aim. Better is to have an openness, receptivity, and aspiration that allows what is needed to come from intuition as higher consciousness descends or inner vision emerges from within. If you are used to performance measures, thinking in terms of 30 sun salutations puts forth a mental goal. But during the actual practice, the mind is more concerned with meeting the goal than being in the moment. Performance goals are often related to ego images. It is easy to want to be able to do one-arm handstands. It is the opposite problem of only doing poses one likes or is good at. The overall balance of the practice can go awry if there is no knowledge of the deeper aims. It is hard to measure how peaceful you can become. Peacefulness is not quantifiable in the same way as endurance or repetition. Fitness tends to value performance. Yoga should value expanding awareness or a connection to a higher consciousness. For instance, I had various people come into the studio who studied other styles of yoga, and several of them radiated tension from their physical intensity. They lacked awareness of the energies they were radiating. The effect of going to a spin class every day will be different from going into a meditative flow. The other issue is being trapped in a vital cycle. Vitality here means how much energy you have to do things. Vitality can be sucked away by things like depression. The energy is very much related to emotions, such as enthusiasm, but it also has a physical component. So motivation is key. The body expresses the emotions and takes its direction from how we feel and what we intend. These energies can build up, producing a restless feeling. Some people like to do workouts to burn off anxiety. The energy behind some movements, postures, stimulates the vitality, which is a good thing, and most people want this, but it can become a trap because you need to burn it off, or you need the workout to feel a certain way, an intensity. The energy is controlling you. You work harder to get the high, which increases the vitality, and you keep chasing it. This cycle often ends by abandoning yoga because it doesn't do it for you anymore. After all, the goal was never really the yoga, but the high. Too much pursuit of goals at any cost, or for ego claims, can blind you to injuries. People doing great intensity run a higher risk of injury, but some styles expect that people will get injured. This goes against longevity and the subtle and spiritual aspects. Some teaching styles can cause trauma, mental, emotional, and even physical injuries. Not all bodies can do all poses for structural reasons, such as the hip joint limiting external rotation in butterfly. People get injured trying to force themselves into things or pursue a goal or an ego image. It is more advanced to have a strong sense of self-observation of the body, energy, emotions, thoughts, and the higher consciousness above. So an overemphasis on athleticism can narrow the view so that only physical performance is valued, with a psychology of staying positive, motivated, persevering, and to overcome obstacles. Some of the athletic qualities are valuable, but not if it is a dramatic mindset or one that crowds out introspection and receptivity. Some people use physical practices to narrow awareness deliberately. It allows them to escape stress and trauma instead of widening and having a meditational receptivity and to become more open. The idea is to make it so intense that you must focus on it. It blots out everything, and nothing is left for self-critical voices, worries, fears, and replaying negative memories. This is the Rajas guna. They are seeking something all-consuming to a respite from the inner pain at worst, or it is like a video game providing a complete distraction, a vacation from life. This could be useful for some, but doesn't align with the greater goals. It is not a one-pointed concentration if it can't be applied freely. Not many can hold their mind on one thing, such as a coin, for several hours. Many can play video games all night. Yoga should produce a meditative state, either open and diffuse or concentrated to one point, and as we discuss with the subtle development aims, it awakens you. So this conditioning spills over into the rest of life, as does a practice that produces a narrowing effect. A common pitfall of systems that only reject all thoughts and movements in meditation is that you get good at rejecting things you should deal with. It becomes easy to dismiss abuse or look the other way. Without an experience of expanded awareness, or any spiritual experience for that matter, you won't know what that means or perhaps even suspect it exists. You eventually peak in your yoga practice and give it up or do maintenance as you age. For yoga, one is often awakened to something beyond. You have to start somewhere. When I refer to conditioning, I mean it in a very broad way. It is easy to relate to physical conditioning, but here we are referring to education, upbringing, and life experiences. This means that when the conditions are right, or you are called on to do something, you will react in a certain way. When you get married, it is a cliché to say that you become like your parents, but there is also some truth. The roles and traits of your parents are absorbed without reflection. Many involve our core ego identities, values, attachments, aversions, and world understanding. Some people take very different paths as a reaction to their conditioning. For instance, they fear becoming like their parents. Athletic conditioning can bring ideas from sports training. People may need recognition, measured achievement, or expect things to be presented in a certain way. Motivational speaking, for instance. Hence, their physical conditioning, or education, limits them. In practicing yoga, part of the expanding awareness is to see one's conditioning. Many dancers are very knowledgeable about the body and movement. Dance ideas sometimes make for creative choreography, focusing on how it looks, its expressive qualities, exploring movement, or generating feel-good moods. The goal can be just to do something different. Creativity means something new that is valuable. So what is the value of the movement or postures? Uniqueness is often an ego-driven aim to stand out and be recognized, but sometimes it is to open doors to new possibilities. Isadora Duncan, a founder of modern dance, had a lot of heart-oriented movements that she got by standing still, sometimes for hours, till movements came. This was an intuitive process of meditation. She also spent time in museums to absorb Greek forms through such things as pottery. You can watch the documentary Reincarnation, the stories in it that point to subtle effectiveness. Feel good is good, except it can be an indulgence and limit the emotional range to enjoyment, the vital cycle, rather than the joy and eventually peace and blissfulness. Athletic students may also choose music where they feed off the beat rather than having something conducive to self-observation. They want to instill a mood rather than opening with receptivity. Controlling the mood is good, but is not necessarily progressive. Athleticism can also include the phenomenal control that one can achieve by focusing on the body, such as being able to induce one's second wind at will. There are also things like biofeedback and regulating the heart rate, blood pressure, body temperature, piloerection, and even superhuman ones. There can be non-obvious athleticism, such as a person who has to adapt due to impairment. They can be athletic by actively overcoming the impairment and finding workarounds, willing to enter into discomfort to move past the injury, rather than the orientation to avoid things and assume they can't. A second problem is that people work, gain some ability, and then life gets in the way and the practice becomes mechanical and they don't make much progress. It is not just that people get into it and then the charm fades. It can be because the aim is unclear and the reason for doing yoga needs a good foundation. They progress in one area but fail to see the connection, or it is vague and not something experienced in other areas, such as emotion, clarity, or intuition. Many benefits are slow and subtle to appear and are often seen in hindsight. On the one hand, one needs to awaken to the deeper aspect. On the other, those aims should be part of the teaching. There is also an ego appeal of seeing something hard that you can't do but could if you follow that person. Yoga can be marketed in this way. In martial arts, there is often a display of trophies or other accomplishments. For dance, there can be pictures and the look of a performance art. It is inspiring and can be motivating. Motivation and inspiration are good. With athleticism, the goal is to channel their energy and motivations towards helping them discover other aspects and challenge their sense of self and reality. Proper sequencing can, when needed, challenge the strength all the time, but from different areas of the body. This involves understanding the subtle elements. This type of practice increases strength, endurance, and the will, but it doesn't tire you out. It engages the vital without generating a habit of demand. With proper sequencing, things can be adapted to a wide variety of needs. People are competitive. Competition is a product of the ego and the fundamental error of division that sees us as separate from the world. We are actually individual, universal, and transcendent all at the same time. Spiritual consciousness sees the unity of all things as the divine is within and behind all. The ego emotions may motivate, but the competitive ambience can creep in. This is difficult. When you see someone in practice who has a deeper forward bend or can easily do something we can't, the mind can naturally compare or measure ourselves against them. But it can also inspire us. We can also appreciate the beauty of it or even share in the feeling of what it is like. The question is, are we aware of which one is happening? So rather than think about the emotions of competitiveness, I approach it as an ego attraction. It differs from a class where you look at what other people are doing or feel uncomfortable when someone else does better. Sometimes people say that yoga is not competitive and put it into some moral context or other, but good athletes see competitiveness as a virtue. Being a strong competitor will mean commitment, giving one's all, and rising to the challenge. Those qualities are invaluable to yoga. Some people think that you have to be flexible to do yoga or feel you must get into shape before they feel confident enough to go to a class. For ambience, ego attractors are many. For instance, I was puzzled when one of the local yoga studios had a class for men only. Our classes are always mixed. It's a non-issue. There are a few body differences based on gender. These are minor or special, such as pregnancy yoga. But when you walk into that studio, the lobby is filled with slim-fitting and revealing women's clothing for sale. So that creates a genderized atmosphere. The focus is not inward and uplifting. Instead of a performance atmosphere, you want one that is meditative and expanding. It is harder to sell a meditative one in my experience. For competitive people, I like to say that the most relaxed person wins or goes out of body. In Part 3, we will look at the aim of subtle transformation. In Part 4, the aim of surrender. If you got something out of this video, please hit the like and subscribe. Till next time.